Hello and welcome to another Jag Bros episode. It is me, Joey, and my two older brothers, JT and Jack, here to talk about the Jaguars. We have just won our third preseason game. We are now 6-0 in the preseason, going 2 seasons undefeated. Not that that really matters. The preseasons mean nothing, and we played a Falcons team that was playing second and third string guys, but let's see if there was any takeaways. We will get into that first. If there was anything that we saw from that game, what do we kind of see for the season? And then the big news is the 53-man roster has just dropped. We'll talk about our first thoughts, surprises, and everything going on with our first 53 starting roster. What is our strongest position and what is our most concerning position? Guys, what did you think about the preseason game last Friday?
Well, Joey, you mentioned it. We're now 6-0 in the last 2 seasons, which means we are slowly but surely catching the Baltimore Ravens' unbelievable 24 preseason victories in a row that was snapped last year. So we're a quarter of the way there. And you know what? It is refreshing because in years past, our 2 and 3 deep guys would just get destroyed. They didn't even look like they deserved to be on an NFL roster. And not only are we competitive with them, but we're actually winning with them. So all in all, I think it's great that the Jacksonville Jaguars are performing well in the preseason. Hey, it's been fun getting to see them play, and now it's time for real football.
And more importantly, we are one step closer to JT's prediction from the last episode. So JT called out that we have a shot to go 20-0 leading into the playoffs. And so we're now 3-0, so 15% of the way there. And shout out to our Uncle Jeff. And he had some friends text us and say that they were driving this weekend and they turned into those, quote, crazy kids from the Jag Bros. And he said, if I know JT like I think I do, I concur with his unbiased and objective 20-0 forecast for the Jaguars. All things are possible with this trio, and I'm a believer. So we are on our way to 20-0 for the Jags.
And we love our Jaguars up in Richmond, Virginia. Let's go. Jacksonville is worldwide. Let's dive into this. The Jaguars outscored Atlanta on the road 31-0. Joey, you already mentioned at the top that Atlanta was playing their backups the entire time. Jacksonville played our starters for at least the first 2 drives. And it's exactly what we wanted to see. We saw third down conversions. We saw touchdowns in the red zone. We saw even a fourth down conversion. And the 2 drives where our starters were nine plays, 92 yards and a touchdown, followed by 13 plays, 62 yards and a touchdown. So here's the key takeaway. How much can we extrapolate this? Maybe not a ton, but the nice thing about it is we saw the things that we wanted to see in this game. Jacksonville converting in high leverage opportunities, Jacksonville converting in the red zone. And who knows, maybe Jack, you were a year early when you're predicting double-digit touchdowns for Evan Ingram.
2 touchdowns from Trevor Lawrence to Evan Ingram. Ingram did not have a single touchdown last year until week 13. So hopefully these 2 touchdowns carry some momentum into the regular season in week 1 with the Dolphins. That was a big takeaway for me for the starters. And then also the running backs, because the Jaguars running game fell apart last year. So ETN looked fantastic, 7 carries for 46 yards. And Tank started slow, but he had some nice runs too. 8 carries, 40 yards, 208 total rushing yards on the ground. That would be amazing in real football.
It was a great performance by the Jaguars. We finally found what makes this offense work, and that's playing against really bad defensive linemen. But hopefully they will take that confidence and bring it into this regular season as we go up against the Dolphins. I was really happy to see ETN make plays. There was this one where the hole was so tiny and somehow he squeezed through and broke it for a big run. He almost broke one for, I think he could have taken it all the way if he didn't trip. As you said, Tank started off a little slow. I didn't think he started off slow. I just saw that when the hole wasn't there, he tried to force his way instead of kind of improvising. One of his things, he could have bounced it outside and actually made quite a few yards, but he decided to run it right up the gap where he was assigned to instead, and then only gained like 1 yard. So I guess he needs to learn how to improvise. But I really liked the wide receivers, the quarterback play. Trevor and Mac Jones both look very good. Parker Washington once again playing really well. Love to see that really awesome sliding catch and then getting right back up right immediately and trying to get more yards. Love that kind of attitude and play. Really excited for this offense. Seems to be clicking very well, and the play calling seems to be much better this season. I don't know if this is Press Taylor or Doug Peterson put together the plays and Press is calling it, but the offensive play calling just looks so much better than it did last year. And I'm very excited to see it in the regular season.
Well, that'll be interesting. We've highlighted the fact that we've seen some more passes over the middle of the field, and it seems like the route concepts, at least in preseason, were better than what we saw in 2023. But what you'll hear me say and what you've heard me say and all of us say is like, it feels like, and that's because we haven't seen it in real life. Most of the time, coordinators use this opportunity in preseason to be relatively vanilla, both on defense and offense. But it's nice to see that we're able to convert what we're able to convert. So I hear what you're saying, Joey. The play calling looks great, and I agree. I'm just not ready to fully stand by that. The other thing that I would call out just is BTJ just continues to shine, and so I could be completely off on that, and it could be really fun. He could have a monster season and actually emerge more as a guy who we're targeting a lot, both in the red zone and on deep plays.
There's not much to complain about when you win 31-0. Defensively, the starters did play for the Jags defense significantly longer than their offense, as most of them played the entire first half. And that was because they didn't click as soon and as early as the Jags offensive starters did. Ronald Darby gave up a couple receptions. He played a little softer in coverage than I would have liked to have seen. Tyson Campbell on the other side locked down, granted, wide receiver 4 or 5 or maybe even 6 for the Falcons, but good to see him back in action. This is going to be a big season to watch. What do the Jags corners do? What does Campbell and Darby look like on the outside for this defense?
Yeah, you mentioned it, Jack. I thought Campbell played very well, granted up against not so very good people, but it was nice to see that lockdown that I didn't see at all last year. So hopefully he brings that confidence and that paycheck is worth it this year. And as you said, Darby really worried me a little bit. It's not that he played badly, it's that he didn't shut down the wide receivers that I felt like he should have. He allowed them to get just a little bit of space. He allowed them to catch the ball, and he was always right there to make the tackle. But when you're going up against a wide receiver 1 or 2, that space could get exponentially bigger, and it could be more worrisome. Just something to kind of view. Hopefully that's not the case, but I wasn't very thrilled with Darby's performance.
Couple of players that stood out. Number one, Trayvon Walker, a big sack there in the first quarter of the game, and then Ventrell Miller, I think, may have led the Jaguars in tackles the entire preseason. He seemed to be in the right place at the right time, which is great to see, and looking forward to see him be able to take the field here.
Yeah, and as you'll notice, we did not talk much about the second half because a lot of those players, yesterday was a big day where the Jaguars and every NFL team moved from their 90-man roster all the way down to their 53-man roster. So in the last couple days, the Jaguars have waived, moved on. They traded Gipson for a 6th-round pick and finalized that 53-man roster. But looking at the 37 players that the Jaguars moved on from, who were a few of the surprises to you that you really thought might have made this Jags team?
Well, my biggest surprise is the Gipson trade. I'm still scratching my head over this. I thought he played well over the preseason, well enough to where I actually knew his number, 50. He was in the backfield. I understand he may not play that much, but I think everyone had him a lock for making the 53 roster. And then to go and trade him for a really late pick makes it seem like maybe he wasn't even going to make the roster, but I don't know. Like, he played definitely well enough to make it. He would have added depth where we're pretty much betting that Walker and Hines Allen will never get injured and never come off the field. I just don't understand why in a position where we're talking about we need more depth, where you cut that to even less depth that we had. It's really confusing to me. I really liked Trent Baalke this offseason, but I don't understand this move at all.
Joey's going against Trent Baalke here. I will say this was a shocking thing I've just recently seen. So as the Jaguars posted the 53-man roster, they have Eric Armstead listed as a defensive end, which he's said a couple times he may play that position. So I think you're going to see a lot more movement. I think you might see Mason Smith shift from defensive tackle to defensive end throughout games as well. But this was kind of a weird move. This is like how I play Madden, where you pick up a guy and then trade him a couple months later to see what you can get. But I guess the Seahawks felt the same way as you, Joey. I guess they liked Gipson and what they saw. And so a 6th-round pick is not a bad pick by any stretch of the imagination. We just drafted 2 years ago Parker Washington. We've drafted Gardner Minshew several years ago in the 6th round as well. So, hey, potentially you got some value for a guy you only signed a couple months ago.
That's a good idea in theory, Jack, and you bring up some good hits. But the other couple of names that were also on the chopping block were Christian Braswell and Eric Hallett, the both defensive backs for that were our 6th-round picks last year. So I think we've already lost 4 or so of those draft picks we had last year, where we had 10 picks. So look, you're going to hit on some of these guys. Parker Washington at least seems to be a nice enough player. Antonio Johnson, we've been really high on since day one of last year. But some of those other guys, Yasser Abdullah, Tyler Lacey, they haven't really done a whole lot to make you excited. And then almost half of the guys in that 6th and 7th round picks are already off the team. So it's like, well, why are we accumulating all these picks only to drop them 2 years later?
You bring up these picks, but also we're a team that's looking to win now. And if you're looking to win now, then you keep Gipson on the team. Like, I don't understand accumulating more picks. And I understand Eric Armstead, Mason Smith, and they really like Miles Cole, who's a 7th round draft pick. I don't know if he's better than Gipson though. Like, I think he still has a lot more to come, and you're going to be rotating these guys, but Gipson was still going to play. Maybe not a lot, but he was going to be on the field and making some sort of contribution. And you just went and traded that for a late round pick for next year when you're trying to win now. Like, if you're trying to win now, why get rid of the player?
That's what JT and I've been saying. This is not a win now off season. There's been some good moves, some moves that are head scratching, but this is not a Houston Texans. They made win now moves. Go bring in an old veteran wide receiver that may have 1 or 2 great years. Go get a big time edge rusher in Danielle Hunter. Those are guys trading high draft picks, making big moves. The Jaguars are potentially setting themselves up nicely for the long term, but I've said this a lot, and Jags fans are not going to like me for this, but this is not a legit Super Bowl contender with this roster.
Whoa, Jack, take that back.
Yeah, and Baalke is proving. I don't see. I know some Jags fans are saying, "Hey, we may not be done. We may go make a move for an edge guy." We've been saying that for a year and a half, and Baalke still is not. So I'm not holding my breath for a move like that. Otherwise, I'd be dead several times over.
Well, it's so tough for me because all of me is so frustrated with the roster construction, especially with some glaring holes that we've seen for months, if not years now within this organization. And we have highly question marks around some of the draft picks. We've highlighted multiple times for months about Brenton Strange and that 2nd round pick, but let's also talk about Mason Smith. I mean, I don't think I heard his name called once. He's a rookie. He's a defensive tackle with supposedly really high upside. But according to ESPN right now, he's listed as 4th string behind a slew of other guys at defensive tackle. So, like, you'd like to be thinking these guys that you're picking in the 2nd round are going to be an impactful player. But to me, it's just like we're just throwing those picks away. If anything, I'd be willing to trade picks to get more Gipsons of the world than trying to trust Baalke to find some diamonds in the rough in the 6th round.
I agree with you, JT. I just don't agree with your take on Mason Smith. That I do think that he's actually better than whatever 4th string. I think he's actually probably 2nd string, and he played.
Do you think he's better than Roy Robertson Harris?
Yes.
I
think Roy Robertson Harris actually kind of sucks, but that's just my take.
Hey, he had the 3rd most sacks for us last year, so
that's right.
It's not good if he's terrible.
Yeah, I know, but
what about Otamoeo, or however you say his name? You think Mason Smith's better than him? Because right now he's listed as 3rd string.
No. I think he played very well preseason. He had a lot of flashes, and I think that he's considered second to third string behind Hamilton. But I'm talking about the other D tackles position. There's two. But as y'all said that we're making moves that doesn't seem like we're trying to win now. But if you listen to Shad Khan, the owner, he says he wants to win now. They had a whole interview during the preseason games that he said he's looking to win now. That's why they made all these long-term signings. He just spent over almost like close to $1 billion on these players. He's looking to win now. And I don't know if he's just off on not on the same page as Trent Baalke, but these moves, as you say, doesn't look like we're all in it to win it right now.
Jerry Jones says the same thing.
Here's something that look, we've all been critical on Baalke, but I thought about this today, and I was like, you know what? Let's pull up the roster of the Jaguars pre-Baalke in 2020, and then the current roster, and let's just go position group by position group. Are we better or worse than what we were in 2020? Quickly, Gardner Minshew was our quarterback. Better or worse?
Better.
We had James Robinson at running back. Better or worse?
Better.
Our receiving core was DJ Chark, Laviska Shenault, and Keelan Cole.
Yes, JT, we're better in every position, but James that's like going from shopping at the Dollar General to now shopping at like Kroger or HEB or Tom Thumb. But we need to be at Publix. Like,
I don't disagree with you there.
Better. Like, we've had chances to be even better, and I just feel like we're blowing it in some positions. I just don't know why we're throwing away people who actually were going to make an impact on this field.
Yeah, I mean, look, the guys that got the most starters in our secondary was CJ Henderson, who I believe was just cut today as well by a different team. Sidney Jones, never heard of him. I have like zero recollection that he was. Tavon Bryan was a starter. James O'Shaughnessy was our starting tight end. So like, I agree with you, Joey, that look, we're talking about shopping at, you said the Dollar General. I mean, this is almost like flea market level shopping. And then now you're at a very competitive NFL team, but there's question marks on, are we actually all in? There's question marks. Do we have a roster that is Super Bowl contending? I like, gun to my head, I agree with you, Jack, that this is not a Super Bowl contending roster, but that's where I'm just hoping the luck and the magic and the beauty of the NFL season and getting hot at the right time works, because we saw with the Bortles team essentially be 10 minutes away from a Super Bowl. So like it's possible even with the roster. This is a better roster for the most part, top to bottom, than we had then.
You also have to remember, JT, on that flea market team, the coach that wanted to not get ETN, he wanted Kadarius Toney, who was just waived by the Chiefs. So
this was Doug Marone's team in 2020. But I hear what you're saying.
Like, we've had the worst team for so long, and we're finally competitive. But no, I wish we went all in more than having to hope and wish that we catch fire. That's what we did all last season. And guess what? The fire never came. Like, that's what happens when you're wishing upon a star in the magic. Sometimes the magic just doesn't come. Instead, how about we just go get better players?
It is frustrating because you look at moves that the Eagles just signed a guy who was a very high second round pick last year in Jahan Dotson for essentially nothing. That their own division was willing to trade him away. That's what I'm talking about. That the roster was already loaded and they're just taking chances to like continue to get better. The Eagles do this. The 49ers do this. The Bears seem to be making good front office decisions. The Texans seem to be making really good front office decisions. The Dolphins seem to be making really good front office decisions. It's just frustrating to me when the Jaguars can't.
Right. And to talk about the comparison of pre-Baalke to today, you can easily look at it from a very different perspective, which is he also entered a position where he gets back-to-back first overall picks.
Great point.
He gets 4 first-round picks in 2 years, and you're looking at a team that did not make the playoffs last year, that you were supposed to have gotten this once a decade type pick in Trevor Lawrence, and you're still scratching your head saying, hey, pretty much everyone PFF did AFC South predictions today. Almost everyone did not pick the Jaguars. Pretty much everyone picked the Texans. One person picked the Jaguars to win the AFC South with a team that the Texans were supposed to be years away from being good. And the Jags seem to be kind of stuck back in the middle, more like the Jack Del Rio days.
And you talk about having this once in a lifetime guy, yet we don't have an offensive line, and we haven't had an offensive line to protect him. And we didn't make any moves this offseason to go fill that thing other than getting a better center. We still have some huge question marks at offensive guard. I just don't understand. You go all in and we keep giving him weapons, but if he can't have time to throw it to these weapons, how good are these weapons? Like, you need to bolster up that line.
Speaking of weapons, I do want to hit, because some of the diehard Jag fans are going to want to know the specifics of some of the other maybe surprise cuts. So Tim Jones, wide receiver, was kept over Trammell, Elijah Cooks, and Josh Cephas. JT, you mentioned Christian Braswell. That was a guy who balled out at corner in the preseason. He got cut. Joe, you were really high on Speaks at edge. He got cut as well. And then Tyler Shatley, who is the longest tenured Jaguar, was also cut recently. So you knew there was going to be some hard moves. You're never going to love every single one of the moves, but definitely some head scratchers for the Jags.
Head scratchers, but none of those guys are really the guys that were cut. I don't really think are going to make a huge difference. I don't see them coming on and being a starter significantly somewhere else. And okay, keeping Tim Jones. The reason why you do that versus maybe somebody else who's flashed in preseason is probably more for special teams. And I mean, I for one didn't key in on Tim Jones's special teams play, but he's a veteran. He started for us at times with some other injuries. He's fine. Like, and if he's a plus guy on special teams, then I'm fine with that.
I find funny is that the hatred that the Jags had for Luke Fortner seems to now have passed to Tim Jones. I have never seen a guy who's the sixth wide receiver be hated so much by a team. But the Jag fans really do not want Tim Jones on this team.
I don't think it's hate on Tim. I think fans were really excited. Trammell had some huge plays in the preseason. Elijah Cooks has been a fan favorite. He had a big, nice touchdown in game 3. And Josh Cephas, I really didn't see anything from him, but Jags fans thought he could be a sleeper. And you maybe keep one or two of them on the practice squad. And who knows? I mean, it is a 53-man roster, but Baalke talked about it in yesterday's press conference. It is still very flexible. You will see a ton of moves week to week, especially as you look at the bottom of the roster.
Top to bottom now. Joey, you brought this up at the beginning. I think this is a good spot to do this. What position group do you feel like we're really deep and we can afford to take a couple injuries? And where are we really thin?
Well, as we just mentioned, I think we are very deep at wide receiver, and everyone's crying about Tim Jones making the team over Elijah Cooks and Austin Trammell. Well, even if we take injuries, then those guys are going to make it to the practice squad. I don't think anyone's going to pick them up. And then you can just reinstate them when you have these injuries. Like, they're not going away. They're still on the team somewhat. They're on the practice squad, but if you really need them, they're still there. And we'll have a lot of depth at wide receiver. So I really think that's our biggest tool that we have.
I'll stay on the offensive side of the ball. To me, it's got to be quarterback. You've got Trevor Lawrence. Hopefully takes that next leap forward to elite status, to where we're talking about him as one of the best quarterbacks in the league. And now you have Mac Jones, who showed up and showed out in the preseason. There's a lot of buzz around him. And so you feel like, hey, if Trevor goes down, which we've said a ton over these last couple episodes, you still feel pretty confident in the offense with Mac Jones at the reins. So I feel the best. And I think it's a big improvement from last year of Trevor and CJ Beathard to now Trevor and Mac Jones.
Yeah, staying on the offensive side too, I'll hit tackle. Right, you have Cam Robinson, who Jaguar fans have a love-hate relationship, but ultimately he's been a pretty solid bedrock player for us on the left tackle side. And Anton Harrison, who's going into year 2, that certainly got better as the year went along. And so you have Walker Little as a backup. That's you feel pretty decent about that, even if there is an injury. Guard scares me. Ezra's already proven that he's been relatively injury prone, and Sheriff has not played that hot. And the only other guard Jacksonville currently has on the team right now is Cooper Hodges, who I believe was a 7th round pick last year, who didn't see any time. And so you're talking about a 7th-round pick out of App State who never really saw the field last year is your backup guard. That kind of scares me around what he could potentially do.
Also, we're pretty deep at tight end, honestly. I know we like to hate on Britton
We're not
Strange,
deep at
but
tight end.
what?
We're not deep at tight end.
It's the same
Oh,
three. I mean,
I think we are pretty deep at tight end.
We're
You
not
have
deep on
Evan
tight end.
Ingram, who is very good. Britton Strange, who isn't
It
bad.
stinks.
He's a solid. If he had to play, he would be just a solid tight end. He's not Evan Ingram-esque level. He's not a second-round pick, but he's at least a solidish tight end. I think he would catch the balls that are thrown to him, and I think he can block. And then Luke Farrell, as you know, had some big plays last year, and I don't think he's terrible. So you have 3 very solid tight end options. But I think Evan Ingram's top 5 tight ends out there. That's why Britton Strange doesn't get to play, is because Evan Ingram is so good. I think that's why that's a waste of a second-round pick. But I don't think he's such a stinky player like JT saying.
all I'm
I
saying
mean,
is
look,
Ingram better stay healthy.
Yeah, I agree with you, Jack. Like you're not getting 5 for 55 from Britton Strange or Luke Farrell out there. And I hear what that's a nice narrative, Joey. That Strange, the only reason why he's not seeing the field is because Evan Ingram's so good. But we've seen Strange on the field and he's not been a difference maker, both in the preseason and in the regular season. And so like he doesn't command targets, he doesn't earn targets, and he has not done anything that makes me feel like he's a difference maker on this team.
Well, so we feel pretty confident on the offense. Maybe some concerns, of course, about the offensive line. But as you look at the position group that makes you the most nervous going into week 1, which is about 10 or 11 days away, depending on when you're listening to this, which position group for the Jags makes you the most nervous right now?
I mean, we've hammered it and hammered it and hammered it and hammered it. It's defensive end. It's rush end. You have 2 starters. You have Deshaun Dixon, who's right now on the IR listed as your second string, and Miles Cole, who again, Joey, you've already brought it up. He's a rookie that was what, a 7th-round rookie. That's it. That's your rotation. And in a world in an NFL that typically talks about you can never have enough pass rushers, we've decided that we're only going to have 2 and just never rotate them out. Like very, very, very head scratching to me. And it's not like your linebackers are guys that could play with their hand on the ground and play in too. Because your starting linebackers is Oluokun, Devin Lloyd, and Chad Muma. So those are guys that are not putting their hand on the ground. In fact, like there's a lot of overlap with their skill set. All 3 of them are kind of more middle linebackery than outside linebackers. So that to me just screams, why not go get somebody else there?
I love Miles Cole, and I thought he was a steal for a 7th-round pick, but you're still talking about a guy who played 6 years in college, Louisiana Monroe, and then Texas Tech with 5 career sacks. So you're not less than one sack a year.
Is that more or less than what Trayvon Walker had as a college player?
So you're expecting him to come to the NFL and get double, triple, quadruple the sacks that he got at Texas Tech. Okay. I mean, I hope so, but that's a risky bet.
And oh, by the way, if you were trying to play a whole bunch of man press, like the Jaguars have been saying that they are trying to do, you want to have a really good pass rusher. You think back when the Giants were able to upset the Patriots back in the day, they had 3 or 4 guys that could rush the passer consistently. All had like close to double-digit sacks, if not all of them. You had JPP, you had Tuck, you had a couple other guys I'm forgetting right now off the top of my head, but like that's how you win. That's how these good teams, you saw the 49ers make a trade to go get the guy from Washington last year in the middle of the season.
Chase Young.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, I mean, I do agree with you that we're very light in edge. I think you're a little off on the whole Ryan Nielsen. This defensive line is going to be very different than any other Jags defensive line that we've ever seen. He's going to be rotating each of the defensive linemen in and out. They're going to be playing not the regular position. It looks like, yes, sir, will be doing some edge work. Mason Smith will be doing some edge work. Eric Armstead will be doing edge work. So you're going to have a lot of people who aren't originally edge guys working the edge. So there's going to be a lot of movement, a lot of people coming in, staying fresh on this line. I do think we need more but it's going to be very different than we've ever seen. It's not going to be the same two people lining up. It's going to be a huge rotation. I saw Josh Allen moving inside, outside. I saw Yasser on the outside. We haven't seen Eric Armstead yet, but he most likely will be inside, outside. It's just going to be very different, very just rotational with this new defensive line. So, I mean, we'll see what goes on, but I have to assume Ryan Nielsen was in on the decision to say goodbye to Gipson, and he must have some sort of plan.
That's a great point, Joey. It is going to be really interesting to watch this defensive line, because if you had told me 6 months ago you're going to see Josh Hines-Allen play defensive tackle some snaps, I would have said no way. But Josh Hines-Allen's put on 10, 15 pounds of muscle, and you're going to see him switch inside out. I think you will see pretty much everyone except for maybe a guy like Jordan Jefferson, who is just a true defensive tackle, where Robertson Harris has played edge before for us. So I think you're going to see a very versatile D-line, and we'll see if it works. The group that I'm going to say makes me the most nervous is one of my favorite groups, but also gives me heartburn, anxiety, worry going into week one and against several very talented receivers is the Jags secondary, especially the cornerbacks. The Jags chose to only roll with 5 cornerbacks, 2 of those guys being rookies, another guy, Monteric Brown, being a 7th round pick a couple of years ago. And then you have Campbell, who we think could come back and be amazing, or who struggled mightily in 2023, battling injuries and looking like a guy that was definitely not a starting corner, much less a star corner. So I think the ceiling for the Jags secondary is very high, but the floor is also extremely, extremely low for the secondary, and that makes me nervous.
Yeah, Jack, I think those are good points. What I will say, you have Antonio Johnson and Darnell Savage that are both listed as safeties that have shown that they can and may be deployed as at least a nickel corner in some situations. So I wouldn't be like, right now you have Chad Muma, Lloyd, and Luakon on our kind of base 4-3 defense. It'll be interesting to see how frequently Nielsen actually uses that 4-3 defense, just because so much of the NFL right now is based off in nickel with a lot of 3 wide receiver sets. You want to have that third corner out there covering him, because a lot of times those slot guys, those Amon-Ra's, those Jalen Waddles, those guys that are just killing the defenses with that third best corner lined up against them.
And you brought up the safeties, JT. That was a position that I was so strong on, but after the preseason, it's all banged up, and now I'm actually a little worried about the safeties. You got Cisco and Antonio Johnson starting, and then you have Savage, who's the nickel corner right now, but can play safety. But then after that, you have Daniel Thomas, who's banged up. You have Wingard, who's on the IR. And then you have Gipson, who's suspended. So you got a good safety group, but they're all out right now. So at least for the first 6 games or so, I'm a little worried about this safety depth.
Well, this is our 53-man roster for the 2024-25 Jaguars season. And you never know. They could go 20-0. They could make a crazy run. This is a team with a lot of highly talented players, and we just encourage you to follow along in all things Jags, all things Jag Bros. Hit subscribe on whatever podcast platform you're listening to, or on YouTube, hit subscribe there as well. And we're going to be coming out with one more episode, which is going to be a ton of fun. We're going to give our predictions, where we think the Jaguars will finish up, some breakout players, where we think other AFC South teams will be. And so that's going to be a super fun episode. And then we're right into week 1. Again, 10 days away in Miami versus the Dolphins. So make sure you hit subscribe. The Jaguar season is about to begin, and you better believe the Jag Bros are fired up, and we hope you are too. So we're going to wrap up this episode as we always do. Duval.